Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here, and today I'm going to do a part 2 of a video that I just did. Who are the best NBA players from the 2000s to never make an All-Star team? So the reason that I'm doing a part 2 to this video is that upon making the first one and afterwards looking back, I realized that there were a lot of really talented players that I left off who deserved to be on the list, who those players deserve to be on an all-star team. So they were the snubs of the list of snubs. So they needed a part 2. So this is part 2 of guys from the 2000s that were snubbed for the all-star game, or really just the best players to never be on an all-star team. Okay, so kicking it off, the first guy I have is Richard Jefferson. So most people probably know him from playing for the Nets for most of the 2000s, and also from winning the championship with the Cavs a few years ago as a much older player. So as far as his career stats, he has a line of 12.6 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists. And his best career year came in 2007 to 2008, and this year he averaged 22.6 points a game, 4.2 rebounds, and 3.1 assists, which is pretty good. And the reason that his scoring tick was up a little bit this year is because they traded Jason Kidd, and so they were looking to him more as the leader, and so he got a few more scoring opportunities. And the year that he had the most team success of any year was, I'm not going to count the championship in Cleveland because he was like barely a contributor most of the season, and he was like well past his prime, so it wasn't like the same Richard Jefferson that I'm talking about. But let's say prime Richard Jefferson, 2002 to 2003 season, the Nets won 49 games and got to the finals and lost. And Richard was averaging about 16 points a game that year. It was only his second year, but he was doing really well, so he was a big contributing factor to that team. Him and J. Kidd and Kenyon Martin were really the core guys on that team. Alright, moving on from Richard Jefferson, the next guy that I have down is Jason Terry. Most people probably associate him with the Mavericks and winning a championship with them, or being part of the infamous trade from the Celtics to the Nets, where the Nets made the worst trade in NBA history with him and Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, but that's irrelevant to this. So he was usually a six-man, sort of like what you might think of now as like Lou Williams. Like 10 years ago, he was basically what Lou Williams is now. So his career stat line is 13.4 points and 2 rebounds a game and 4 assists a game. And his best career year was in 2008 to 2009, in which he actually won Sixth Man of the Year for the Mavericks. And that year, throughout his career, he averaged about 20 points a game in a lot of his prime seasons. But in those seasons, he played about 40 minutes a game. But in this season, he only played 30 minutes a game as a sixth man, and he still averaged just a tick under 20 points a game. He had 2 rebounds a game and 3 assists a game. So that's why I think that is his best season. He scored of like 1 more point in a different season, but he also was playing like 10 more minutes. So his efficiency in the year that he won Sixth Man was actually way higher. As far as the best team success he's ever had on any year, in 2010 to 2011 with the Mavericks, they won 57 games and went on to win the title. And he was again the sixth man on that team, averaging 16 points a game. So that's the year that I have down as his best team success, because no other year did he come as close, really. Moving on from Jason Terry, the next guy I have is Hedo Turkoglu. Hedo Turkoglu, I liked him a lot as a player when he was around. He was a guy that he really fell off really quickly. He had a very short prime, but in his prime he was great. But I would almost say that he had a 4-year prime, even though he had about a 15-year NBA career. He had about 4 years of being an elite player. His career averages are 11 points a game, 5 rebounds a game, and 3 assists a game. He was a good point forward. He would take the ball down a lot for whatever team he was playing for and could handle it like a point guard, yet he was 6'11", I think, so that's highly impressive. His best year came in 2007 to 2008, and in this year he actually won Most Improved Player, and he averaged about 20 points a game, just a tick under, 19.5, 6 rebounds a game, and 5 assists a game. And the year that he had the most team success was the next year with the Magic. They won 59 games and got to the finals and lost to the Lakers, but they were still a really good team, and he did really well for them too. He was averaging more around 16 points a game instead of 19 or 20, but still contributing a ton. And they had added a lot of pieces that year too, so it made sense that his scoring tick went down just a little bit. Next on the list, I have a guy that's still playing today, but is a free agent right now, but he's a little bit younger than a few of these other guys. It's Monte Ellis. Monte might be classified as a good stats, bad team guy, but I think that he was talented in his prime, and he did make the playoffs sometimes, and even as recent as 2014 and 2015, when he was on the Mavs, he was the leading scorer, and they were a playoff team. So, I don't think he's necessarily just a good stats, bad team type of player. So his career line is 18 points a game, 4 rebounds a game, and 5 assists a game. And in his best season, that was in 2009 and 2010 with the Warriors, and he averaged 26 points a game, 4 rebounds, and 5 assists a game. And the reason that he averaged so many points that year compared to any other is that they were really lacking talent that year. And Steph was just a rookie and really just trying to find his way. And the stage was just wide open for Monte to take over and take a ton of shots, and he did. And the year that he has the most team success is 2006 to 2007, which is the year that the Warriors famously beat the 1-seeded Mavericks. It's considered by some about the biggest NBA playoffs upset ever. The Mavericks had 67 wins. Warriors had 42. They got to the second round then after beating the Mavericks and lost, but they got to the second round. So that's the year that he had the most playoff success, and he was averaging 17 points a game that year. He was sometimes a sixth man, sometimes in the starting lineup. But he averaged 17 points a game, so that was pretty good. Moving on, the next guy I have is a guy who I think you could more fairly classify as a good stats, bad team guy, but that doesn't. I mean, you can still be a good player and just have poor surrounding players, but it doesn't mean that you're necessarily bad. But I think that this guy would be defined as a good stats, bad team type of player. It's Kevin Martin. His most tenured stops in the NBA came at Sacramento, where he started playing for about 6 years, I believe, 7. And then he played for Houston for about 3 or 4 after that. And those are his longest stops on any team. His career stat line is pretty good, though, as far as points. He scored 17.4 a game. He only had 3.2 rebounds and only 1.9 assists, which is a bit disappointing because he's 6'7", so I feel like 3 rebounds is not very much, and less than 2 assists is disappointing as well for a guy that had his hands on the ball a lot. But he was really just all about getting buckets. He's sort of like poor man's Klay Thompson, if that's any comparison. But he never was on a good team, really. The year that he had the most team success, or actually his best season, was in 2010 and 2011 with the Rockets. And he had one other good season I was considering with the Kings, where he averaged more points, but in that year he only played half the season. Whereas in the season I'm talking about with the Rockets in 2011, he played 80 games, so I feel like that's really his better season. In that season with the Rockets, he averaged 24 points a game, 3 rebounds, and 2 assists. So pretty good, but still really low on rebounding and assisting. But points are really good. The year that he had the most team success was in 2012 to 2013 with the Thunder. They were a 60-win team, and he was a sixth man, or sometimes he started, sometimes he was a sixth man. And he scored 14 points a game that year, and they lost in the second round because, if you recall, Westbrook was out for most of those playoffs, so they're missing, one half of their big duo. And yeah, so Kevin Martin, really good player, just always ended up on bad teams. He's sort of like the guy that gets traded for a good player, if that makes sense. So like in 2012, the Rockets traded him for James Harden. He's sort of like that player that's good enough to get traded for a good player, but he himself is never the one that people are trying to trade for, if that makes sense. He's always just like the return for a good player. And so moving on to my last player here, it's Al Jefferson. He is a very underrated player, and it's sort of unfortunate to see him playing these days because his game has really, it's maintained. He's gotten a bit older and a bit slower and heavier, but his type of style of gameplay has really been devalued in today's NBA. He's all about getting on the low block and doing turnaround shots and just working everything from the low post and the block and doing a bunch of moves down there. And because the game has sped up so much and it's all about three-pointers, he's really lost a lot of his value that he had about 10 years ago, or even like as recently as 5 years ago, because teams aren't really looking for low post scorers anymore. It's an epidemic across the NBA. He's like one of the biggest victims of it, or I don't know if victim's the right word, but the repercussions of this type of system and gameplay, they've hurt him the most, in that he was a guy in his prime, he's averaging about 20 a game, and now he's averaging like 5 points a game off the bench. But okay, that's all beside the point. His career stat line is about 16 points a game, 8 rebounds, and 1.5 assists. His best season was in 2013 to 14 with the Bobcats. I think it was either that was or the next one was the last year that they were actually the Bobcats before they went back to the Hornets. So there you go. In that season, let's see here. He scored 22 points a game, 11 rebounds, and 2 assists. And they got to the first round of the playoffs. And he actually got all NBA third team as a center, but he didn't get into the All-Star game, which is really odd. But honestly, getting on an All-NBA team is a better accomplishment. But because he technically was never an All-Star, I included him on this list. The year that he had the most team success was hard to pick because he had about 4 or 5 years where he was on a team and they lost in the first round. So I just went with this year on the Jazz from 2011 to 2012. They were 36-30 in the lockout shortened season, and they lost in the first round. And he averaged 19.2 points a game. But the reason I picked this season over, say, the 2013-14 season with the Bobcats is because in 14 with the Bobcats, Kemba was the primary option and Al was the second option. Whereas in 2011 to 2012 with the Jazz, he was like the go-to guy on that team, and he was the first option. And I don't know if he's good enough to be a franchise player, but he was the closest thing that the Jazz had to a franchise player on that team. So that's why I decided that was the best team success over the other seasons that he had. So that's it, guys. That's 6 players that I thought also deserved to be All-Stars that were in the 2000s and were really good players. They just, there's never enough spots on the All-Star team for everybody. So naturally, a few are going to get left off. And apparently, because I'm making a second video, more than a few, there's a decent number that have never made an All-Star team but deserved it. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.